Alright, folks, so we're doing something a little different today. We're having internet problems, and every service we used, it was freezing, and there was going to be no way we could get through it, so we're legitimately actually doing this where we're having a phone call on speakerphone and and having the microphone pick up both of our voices. There was nothing else we could do. Apologize for it. The internet is what it is.
Yeah, and I think at this point, since this is the second day we're recording, third time trying to record. The first time there was audio and some video issues, and I think I can speak for myself. I know I just really want to get to these videos though. It's
yeah. Funny enough, the previous videos we did in the Spider-Man line, if one of those had messed up, I wouldn't be as disappointed. We already recorded the movie rewind once before, but so basically what we're doing is, if you're new to the channel, thank you for showing up. But we do a bunch of different types of videos on Lightning Channel. One of them is Movie Rewind, and we started with the various Spider-Man series. So we've already covered. We started with the Homecoming movies, the MCU movies. We did the Amazing Spider-Man films, and lastly we did the Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies. And then we're going to end it with, obviously, what's on the screen, Into the Spider-Verse. But this is going to be a two-part, because we also do another series that we really love doing called
Art Combos.
Art Combos, yes. And so for Art Combos is basically where we take art books, and we usually cover a specific artist. So in the past we've done Dave Stevens, the creator of The Rocketeer, Dan Panosian, who did create stuff, but and you just got that you just ordered that same art book. Yeah, I did. So I actually have that art book coming in. And then we also did Darwin Cook, another legend who unfortunately died a few years ago. So this is going to be a little different, but we're going to start with Movie Rewind, which is what this video is, and then the next video that comes out will be Art Combos Into the Spider-Verse. So to get started for the third time now, Travis, I had run across something a few weeks ago that I had talked to you about, this Twitter hashtag, like, name 5 perfect movies. And, and it was pretty ridiculous. The things that people were posting were all over the place, and I thought about it, and at the time I was like, I don't know if there is a perfect movie, but when I rewatched Into the Spider-Verse, specifically for this video, I actually asked myself, like, is this a perfect movie? And I really came to the conclusion that this is about as close as you get, like, storytelling, art, which obviously we're going to delve deeply into.
Which I'm very excited to. I actually haven't seen the contents of the book outside the photos you showed me, and just seeing the photos that you sent make me very excited. And you know for a fact I've already loved the art style of this movie.
Mm-hmm.
I talked about it at length, and I'll say it. I said it before in these, and I'll say it again. It is a comic book come to life on the screen, with the type of patented style that Sony uses for this. To the way they use sound effects in this movie is so effective and beautiful. It just all around for me. It probably is that perfect movie. You have great story, great art, great cinematography, great acting from people who are in separate rooms from each other. If there's chemistry there somehow, that's great.
Yeah, we had discussed in the Sam Raimi films, one of the issues is that almost no one has chemistry in those movies. You just kind of accept it because it was, at the time, those Raimi movies, you know, all people had comparisons to was the X-Men movies, because comic movies typically were terrible. So people kind of accepted, like, you know, those Spider-Man movies up until the third one. People really just accepted, you know, whatever came out. But here, yeah, these animated characters, unto like the characters like Spider-Ham, you know, and Penny Parker, who aren't in the movie that much, like even they have great chemistry. And it all starts with the two central Spider-Men in this. One theme that we've had of discussing the various Spider-Man movies is every actor that's played Spider-Man in the movies has gotten like one or two things right, but none of them really are Peter Parker. Like even Tom Holland, who gets a lot of credit, is kind of like half a Spider-Man. You know, like he's good, but he's not playing the Peter Parker that we grew up with. And then you get this movie, and Jake Johnson, and obviously Lord and Miller, who did the Lego movie, Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, and 21 Jump Street. Their writing, like it nails it. Like this is Peter Parker.
Yeah, I think they captured it, and I don't know if it's a live action versus animation thing, you know, that's able to achieve it, but the writing is so good in terms of capturing that character, and the casting of Jake Johnson as Peter B. Parker, you know, as an older, kind of worn out Spider-Man was such a perfect fit, and a good compliment to, I'm going to butcher his name, was it
Shamik Moore, yeah.
Yeah, to his version of Miles, who's a lot more vibrant, you know, character when we're meeting him, right? You know, especially when he's around his uncle, how excited he is, and then, you know, when you meet Peter, he's a lot more worn out and kind of weary of being a superhero, or at least kind of tired of it a little bit.
Yeah, so Jake Johnson plays two different versions of Peter Parker. He plays the blonde-haired, super successful...
No, he does not. I hate to contradict you, but that was Chris Pine.
Are you sure?
I am willing to put money on it.
Okay. Wow, I didn't notice that. All right, well...
Yeah, because it's a completely different... I don't know what the word is for the different tone of voice.
Octave?
Yeah, I guess.
Timbre?
Let's see. Yeah, Chris Pine.
Wow, that's crazy. I didn't even notice that it was two different guys. Well, then yeah. Chris Pine plays the Batman-esque Peter Parker, who the animators or the writers, one of the two, affectionately referred to him as Rustin Pete, which I always thought was a cute joke.
I laughed when you told me that, and I'm laughing again. That is pretty funny.
But yeah, Peter B. Parker is, interestingly enough, they heavily imply that he is a version of the Sam Raimi Spider-Man. Like, so it's not 100% exact, but there's three scenes. You know, each character gets their own introduction, like their mini origin story, as they come into play. And so, when Peter B. Parker shows up, they show a scene from each of the Raimi movies. You get a version of the bridge scene where he's holding up cars hanging over the bridge. You get a version of the Peter stopping the train scene. And then lastly, you get the emo, evil Peter dancing scene from the third.
Which is probably your favorite part.
It is. It's my favorite part in all of Into the Spider-Verse. I just rewatched that. I don't actually watch the whole movie. I just rewatched that scene. But he's heavily implied to be that version of, which I like. And then this version of Miles Morales, and I don't have a problem with Miles Morales as a comic book character. He's never been somebody I was into just because I'm not a Brian Bendis fan. But I don't have a problem with the character. I think it's a fun character. But this version of it is probably the best version of Miles Morales. Because I've told you before, like, the reason this movie works is specifically because Miles is relatable. Like, everything about this character, and it doesn't matter, what skin tone you have, where you're from. Like, the things that Miles goes through in this film are something that every person who's ever been a teenager can relate to. It has nothing to do with superheroes. And that's kind of why I say this is a perfect film. Like, this is a movie that is very much a lesson in how to do great storytelling. You cut out all the superhero stuff and you have, like, character arcs that people understand. You understand Peter B. Parker, who's been working his whole life and trying to do the right thing, and and things didn't work out with his wife, and his mother dies, and like, all this stuff, and it's very human and very real.
Yeah, and again, these are CG characters we're getting this emotion from. So it still blows my mind, the fact that we were having those problems with specifically the Raimi ones, in terms of chemistry, and maybe was it the second Amazing Spider-Man one you could throw in there as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think the issue is every Spider-Man movie before this one is trying to get over something else. Like, when Sam Raimi did Spider-Man, he was trying to achieve something like, okay, comic book movies typically suck. Let's do something fun and campy, and that worked for a while. And then you got the Amazing Spider-Man movies by Mark Webb, I believe, and the criterion there was like, oh, well, we can't do something campy. We need something a little more darker, a little more realistic. You mentioned it. Probably influenced by the Dark Knight movies.
Yes.
And then when the MCU movies came, then they're trying to go in the opposite direction of the Amazing Spider-Man movies. So they're always competing with something, and nobody's really just trying to go out there and tell a great Peter Parker story, a great Spider-Man story. Whereas with this movie, they didn't have to compete with anybody. Like, nobody knew this movie was coming out. Nobody heard anything about it. Even almost to the day that the movie showed up in theaters, people didn't know what to expect from it.
Yeah, I think that was a problem with advertising, and I think it confuses people who already know Spider-Man as Peter Parker, so they're not sure what to make of it. You know what I mean?
Right. I wasn't super interested during when they released the teaser, but when they started showing more of the movie and what the movie was going to be about, which the trailers didn't cover it. The trailers didn't do a great job for this film.
Yeah, they really didn't. All they showed was Miles kind of in his, like, actually it was like minced up scenes from the Leap of Faith scene towards the end of the movie, with a lot of cut up stuff of that, and his interactions with Jake Johnson's Peter, and the scene where Gwen Stacy comes in, and because you don't see any of the other characters from the Spider-Verse show up in those trailers. At least I don't recall seeing them in the trailer at all.
Right. No, they kept that pretty mum. And
which I'm glad they did. But I wish there was a little bit more plot revealed.
Yeah, this movie did okay, and well enough that supposedly they're making sequels, but it didn't do the kind of money, make the kind of money that it should have, given how good it is. It actually very much reminds me of Batman Mask of the Phantasm, which is, to this day, is the best representation of Batman of any movie. The Dark Knight.
Yeah, you pointed this out last time. That's another December release movie.
Yeah, so it's interesting because December is typically a bad time to release films. It's one of those times, like now it's February is considered more when studios do this, but for a long time, December was when studios would just drop movies like early December that they didn't have much confidence in. Now, because of that, certain movies that have come out in December have actually taken advantage of it. So, like the Dark Knight movies, previously some of the Star Wars movies, those movies have come out in December and done very well because there was nothing to go against. But a lot of movies that they release in December typically bomb. But yeah, nobody really knew what to expect from this.
Yeah, again, it's just, I think bad advertising, and I said this on the last video, but this was also going up against Aquaman at the time, which was a big movie. I mean, it was a movie that made $1 billion, and it was one of the most talked about things around Christmas in terms of going to see movies.
Yeah, it actually really kind of stuck in my... And look, if people like Aquaman, that's their business. I'm never going to tell people what they should and shouldn't like, but it really did bug me that a movie this well done, forget the superhero part. Like, this is a really well done movie that didn't make anywhere near the amount of money that Aquaman made, and Aquaman is a garbage film. It is not well done. Like, if you like it, that's fine. If you like it, that's fine. But it's not well done. It is a bad film. And yeah, I mean, maybe it wasn't a competition, but I really wish this movie would have made the kind of money it should have made in theaters.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing: we're still getting a sequel from it. I think there's was some kind of spin-off with Spider-Ham. Something what John Mulaney's doing. They're doing some Spider-Ham cartoon from this.
I think I did hear about that. That's the thing, though. So, I love this film, and you and I have discussed, I do worry about the sequel because the reason this film's so good is because it has a story to tell. And I worry that the sequel is just going to be another one of those movies where it exists just because, the first one was good. And they're like, okay, we can make money if you do a second one. And if you take away the storytelling, it'll still be like a fun film. And when it comes to Spider-Ham, I know people went nuts for Spider-Ham in this, but that's the closest I come to having a complaint. Now, I do like John Mulaney as Spider-Ham in this. And he even has character moments, but that's when the movie becomes very... I mean, I know this is corny to say, but it becomes very cartoony the second Spider-Ham shows up.
Yeah, it can get weirder.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, I'm not hating on it. Like I said, this is one of the few films where I really... If I had to try, I could nitpick and say, okay, that didn't make sense, or this didn't make sense.
Oh, yeah.
But,
I could totally nitpick.
But I have to nitpick.
This.
I have to nitpick to really come up with something bad about it. And I told you before, there's a story. So Lord and Miller were fired from the movie Solo, and funny enough, I'd never had any interest in a origin story of Han Solo. I always thought it was kind of pointless, and removing Harrison Ford from the role seemed silly to me. But when I heard Lord and Miller were writing and directing it, I was like, oh, okay. All right, that might be interesting. It's probably not a good idea, but I'll at least try that. And after 90% of the film was finished, they were famously fired by Kathleen Kennedy and I guess the Lucasfilm and Disney boards. Supposedly they didn't like the tone which a lot of people said, well, it's probably too jokey because that's what Lord Miller do.
Yeah.
And so they got fired and replaced by Ron Howard, and the movie still didn't do well. And but they came out after this movie and they said, after we got fired from that, we took all our effort and put it into this movie, and I want to say Lego 2 as well, but primarily into this movie. And I'm so thankful that Solo became a piece of crap that very few people, I won't say no one, but very few people seem to care about, because this movie is brilliant. And it's kind of fun. I do wonder, like, if somebody at Disney, because this movie isn't an MCU movie, this is a Sony film. And I do wonder if somebody at Disney isn't kicking themselves, like, why did we fire those guys?
Well, I mean, for this type of movie, I think the tone's probably right. I don't know if they would have been great on something like that was supposed to be an action-adventure movie, such as Solo, you know what I mean?
No, because Lego Movie is an action-adventure movie. It's animated,
but it's also a kids' movie that's aimed to be a comedy. Unfortunately, Star Wars is not a kids' movie anymore.
I mean, I never saw Solo, but I can't imagine it's that adult. Plus, they did 21 Jump Street. Like, I don't know. I think
kids love 21 Jump Street.
I understand, but Star Wars. You just said Star Wars is an adult film, like.
Well, it used to not be.
I don't know where you're going with this. But my point is like, look, I don't know that Solo would have been a good film with them at the helm. I don't like the guy that they chose to be Harrison Ford's replacement. But I'm just saying, like, I do feel like somebody had to see this film at Marvel and Disney and go like, yeah, that was probably a mistake. Like, like, we should have just ran with it and seen how it played out, because it didn't play out very well anyway. But, moving back to it, the casting, you mentioned Shamik Moore. We talked about Jake Johnson and Chris Pine that I didn't realize. I don't know how I didn't realize it was a different guy. But,
I thought you knew.
No, it just I never noticed. But there's the entire cast is fantastic. You have Haley Steinfeld as Gwen Stacy. You have Mahershala Ali, who I love from the Luke Cage Netflix series. Lily Tomlin as Aunt May. She's great. Let's see. John Mulaney, you mentioned. I'm not a big John Mulaney fan, but he's perfect.
Same.
He's perfect as Spider-Ham. Liev Schreiber is Kingpin. And then of course the great Nicolas Cage as the absolutely batty Spider-Man Noir, and again, perfect. This film, perfect casting. The acting is fantastic. The story, this is how you make great films. First, it starts with caring about things. And I think that's the problem with a lot of superhero films is you get, especially like on DC's end, like you get these people who, they don't care about those characters. They're just like, all right, we got to make an Aquaman movie. All right, who's Khal Drogo? Take his shirt off. Women will, go nuts for it. People spend money. Like, they don't care. Like, this is a movie. The reason that this movie works so well is because you can tell the people involved cared. There's so many details, so much like beauty in every frame.
I think I've already talked about this a couple of times, but I mean, the art style that Sony Animation uses for this is just unreal. The use of halftone effects, so if you notice that dot texture on the skin, like on skin or clothing or whatever, that's like what you would call halftone, and that's kind of like a nod towards the printing. When comics used to be printed I guess back in the 60s and 70s, they would have this kind of halftone dot look if you will look at the colors closely. Yeah, so that's kind of emulating that here.
We'll get into that a little bit more when we do the art book.
Oh, yeah, I'm not going to go into it, but I'm just saying, like, you know, there's so many little touches that bring this movie to life. It's incredible.
Similarly, we'll be able to go into this further in the next one, but one thing I mentioned to you when we tried this the first time was the cinematography for this film is comparable to literally anything out there. It is not every shot, but a massive amount of this film is shot with, like, unbelievable cinematography. Just frames that could be a simple flat angle of two characters facing each other, something like that, are done with such precision and, like, forethought that, you know, and I'll explain this real quick for people who don't know. Great cinematography comes down to this. When next time you're watching a movie, randomly hit pause and just look and see. And great cinematography usually means, like, to me, like, you freeze frame a random shot and it could be an award-winning photo. And the examples I always use is, like, Royal Tenenbaums is very much like that.
Yeah.
And surprisingly, Mission Impossible Fallout, amazing cinematography. And this film is, to me, better than cinematography than both of it. Now, yes, it's a little different cinematography when you're doing an animated film, because in some ways it's cheating because, you know, as a comic book artist, there's things you can do that a regular camera can't do. You can cheat.
Yes.
However, the amount of work that goes into doing something like this is actually harder than if you just shot it regular with like a real camera and live people. So there's a back and forth on it, but this is a beautiful film, and you could literally turn off the sound and just enjoy this film for just the stunning visuals.
Yeah, you know how I feel like that. I'm going to end up talking more about once we get into the art book. But it really is that perfect movie, man. You have everything you need on it. You have convincing characters. You have I'm sorry, I probably already said the cinematography. But as a whole, it really is that perfect movie to me. And we said it, we can nitpick and pick it apart, but it's so much fun. There's a lot of heart there. There's so many great moments and great character turns that are earned. I talked about this in the first one, but, like, you know, things, the character development in Miles and Peter B. Parker and in Gwen Stacy is very evident in that movie, you know, from Miles kind of growing up over this movie and taking that literal leap of faith to Peter B. Parker taking on fatherhood and kind of getting, I guess you could say, like a groove back into being Spider-Man. I think Gwen getting friends in the movie, you know, opening herself up to becoming friends with someone again. I think that was great. Yeah,
they all have their character arcs in this to varying degrees. Obviously, Gwen Stacy's isn't as much of a leap, but Miles in particular and Peter both have, like, full arcs where, you know, like you mentioned, Peter and fatherhood. Like, there's a brief mention of Peter where Peter says the reason that he and Mary Jane were no longer married was because she wanted kids and it scared him. And, you know, there's a very, like, ironically it's a loud moment, but he says quietly when they're fighting in the collider at the end of the movie, he puts his hand on Miles' shoulder and he says, I'm so proud of you, son. And he quietly goes to himself, he's like, do I want kids? You know, and it's there. There's so many little details. There's so many quiet moments, in the movie that if you're not paying enough attention, you miss. And a lot of that's the jokes. You know, people talk about like, again, I heard people say Lord and Miller are too jokey. First of all, the jokes in this movie are a lot more subtle than any other superhero movie I've ever seen. A lot of them are just quiet asides. Secondly, even with that, this movie's way funnier than any, like, it's not constant jokes. It's not. But well placed, witty jokes that you can, they're still funny because they're witty. They're not like shocking, you know. I mean, some of them are. You know, we mentioned we talked about the Spider-Ham fourth wall breaking where he says, "That's all, folks," and Jake Johnson says, "Is he allowed to say that legally?"
Yeah.
You know.
That was actually pretty funny, though, to do that.
Yeah, but that's the closest you get to like a shocking joke. Even though I do really enjoy that joke. And real quickly, I'll mention, and I brought that again. I hate saying over and over again. We've talked about this before, but it's so awkward to have the same conversation.
Oh, sorry.
Again.
Yeah, I mean, I'm
no. I've been doing it too, but one of my favorite jokes in the film, pretty close to my favorite, is the scene where Mary Jane is telling everyone, you know, like, you know, it could have been anyone in the suit, and you know, she says at the end of the speech, she says, "We're counting on you," and Miles is there, and he goes, "They're counting on me," and there's a guy next to him, who leans over and goes, "Probably not you. I think it's a metaphor." And I also told you, like the weird thing about the way my brain works is, in my head, the guy that's talking to him is designed to look like Tobey Maguire, and it's probably just me, but in my head, that's Tobey Maguire leaning over and saying that to him.
I can see why you say that, though. I can understand that, but I didn't get that.
I'm sure no one else did.
To have them cameo, though. I don't know if that was even a thing they were trying to do.
Well, you know, who was it? Was it? I think it's Tom Holland is now lobbying for a live-action Spider-Verse movie. Did you hear about that?
What was that?
Did you hear that Tom Holland is lobbying for a live-action Spider-Verse movie?
I hope they don't do that.
I agree. I think it would be pretty bad. And also,
they just need to end that, because I have a feeling that they should probably either transition Tom Holland out of the role eventually, because this feels like with these movies they want them to move him so fast. Or I have a feeling the studio might want to put Miles in or someone else in as Spider-Man.
Yeah, that's possible.
I don't know what they'll want to do if they want to continue a partnership with Marvel after this, because that's a whole rights thing that I don't want to get into.
Right. A couple other things I wanted to mention. I've often mentioned the score in the previous films, and this is one of those movies that, in lieu of a score for the, I mean, there's score here and there, but
there is, yes,
but it's not prominent. In lieu of that, this is one of those movies that has more of a soundtrack, but the soundtrack's clearly curated to fit the film, and I actually love the soundtrack for this film, and I really think it definitely fits the moments, like, and really works for what they're going for.
Yeah, we had talked. I need to stop saying that, but we had mentioned that there's just it captures that mood, and you had said this on the last one. I want to mention it again, and the reason why is it was the song. What was it? I'm Not Scared, where it captures that moment.
Right.
When Miles is kind of dealing with what he saw, what's happened to him, and he doesn't know what to do, and he almost feels lost in this, and you know. The role of the score sometimes is to help you feel certain emotions, and that's, you know, mission accomplished for using that song, because I definitely felt that in the theater. You're kind of like, as soon as Miles comes back and sees his mom and dad, he hugs his mom and dad, and they start to do like the news broadcast talking about Peter's dead, and the music kicks in, and it's pretty emotional.
Absolutely. And there's a few songs in the score that like have that moment, not specifically that moment, but the Post Malone song works in multiple scenes, not to the same level that Scared of the Dark does, but also What's Up Danger when Miles comes into his own, that is such a powerful song in that moment. And it's funny, like, it's interesting to me because, like, I'm not a big modern rap guy. Like, I don't like a lot of
I
new rap.
knew who Post Malone was before this movie.
I had heard of him. I'd never seen him. But he's actually a super talented dude. If you've never, he recently.
Yeah, nothing against. I just honestly have never heard of him.
No, I just wanted to drop it in here real quickly. The other day, he did a tribute to Nirvana.
Oh, that's cool.
And
how was it?
Unbelievably good. He actually sounded better than Kurt Cobain. He's actually a super talented dude. He's a weirdo though. But anyway.
Kurt Cobain or Post Malone?
Both of them. Post is a little.
Real quick. Gun to your head. Make a decision. Who's weirder?
Well, to be fair to Kurt Cobain, Post Malone did, in a tribute to him, bring up the woman that probably murdered him. He was like, "Thank you, Courtney Love." Anyway,
yeah, thanks, Courtney Love.
But anyway, I don't remember where I was going with. But yeah, I'm not big into modern rap music, but in a way, the movie helps sell the music as much as the music helps sell the movie, and I really love that album. So,
do you think a lot of that is because Sony, since it's Sony, has so many connections to like, you know, there's Sony Music, so that they can easily reach out to get some good music for their properties?
Maybe so. I mean, you know, I've heard people complain about this, but I understand it totally. This is a Sony movie, so anytime you see a electronic product, it's always Sony, like Sony Vaio, you know.
I don't understand what the problem would be with that.
I don't either, but people like to nitpick, like, oh, of course he's using a Sony Ericsson phone. I'm like,
has no one watched a movie before where they see all these product placements done subtly, and I think they might only notice it just because it might be a Sony movie?
Yeah, I think. Well, I mean, people do complain about advertising all the time, but I think the complaint here is that the idea is that Sony makes movies like this so that they can sell their products, and
I don't believe that for this.
No, I agree with you. I think it's silly, but I think people do say that. The last thing I wanted to mention is the comics, because obviously when the title came out, Into the Spider-Verse, you know, there have now been 2 Spider-Verse events, and I thought that this movie was going to be based on the original Spider-Verse comic. And thankfully it wasn't. Not to hate on that comic too much, but this is its own story. It does its own thing, and it does it brilliantly.
Yeah.
And it also goes to show you, like I've always said, I don't care that you perfectly recreate, you know, comic book stories as long as you get the characters right. And, you know, there's changes to these characters for this movie, but, you know, particularly with Peter Parker, they got it 100% dead on.
Yeah. I've read some Ultimate Spider-Man with Miles in it, and I could say it's pretty close, but the thing is, where I started reading Ultimate Spider-Man with Miles was like later down the line, so I didn't get to see him as how he started. You know what I mean? Because when they start writing the character, of course he might be unsure of himself and whatnot, but I didn't read that far into it.
Well, I feel like we should end this one here because we still need to do the Art of the Spider-Verse art combos.
Okay, man.
But yeah, I think we've said, like, love this movie, couldn't speak higher of it. Previously, to me, the two best superhero movies ever made were Mask of the Phantasm and Pixar's The Incredibles. And this movie rivals those films, if not in some ways surpasses them.
Yeah, I agree.
So, thank you, Travis, and
Thank you, sir.
we should mention artoftravishymel.com.
Yeah, Hymel. You can search me on YouTube as well. I got some drawing videos I post up. I need to get back to doing some how-tos. I might have one posted today. I'm not exactly sure. But yeah, definitely check that out. Adam is also on one of my a couple of the live streams now, where we're kind of just talking. He helps explain some of the stuff I'm doing while we're talking about comic book stuff, and it's pretty fun.
Yeah, if you've never seen a comic book artist draw, like, you can... I think that's why we enjoy art combos, is like, we're teaching people something. You can learn a lot about art by watching these videos, and the live streams are like that. Now, some of the live streams are us, like, kind of, I'll use the term bullying around, because we're keeping it PG. But we do try to talk about, like, your art style and what you're doing and stuff. But
Yeah.
so yeah, check out Travis Hymel, Hymel, in YouTube, and you can see all those. Obviously, like and subscribe to the video, and see you on the next one. The next one should be out about a day after this one comes out. So thanks, folks.